All right, so here we are planning for what is shaping up to be a great summer for travelers and a great summer for small businesses and the tourism industry as a whole. There's no doubt that everyone on today's call has worked tirelessly up to this point, possibly harder than they ever have in their tourism careers. And we're looking at what I like to think of as the home stretch. This is a time where we take all we've learned from our locals, our businesses, each other, even some of our previous webinars, and we're now putting them all to work. I'm Patrick King. I'm the founder of Imagine. I live in Gainesville, Virginia, which is about 40 miles from Washington, D.C. But I try to travel as much as possible, so you may not find me there very often. Imagine is a branding and marketing agency with offices throughout Virginia. We specialize in local government, tourism, and economic development, and we provide an end to end process for our clients that goes from research through strategy, implementation, and advising our clients on ways to optimize their campaigns. And we do this through learning about each destination thoroughly from guest, business, even community leader insights. Only then do we develop our marketing plans, website development, or branding campaigns. So let's go ahead and jump in. Our adventure today begins with research. There are a lot of great data points that we can use to prepare for our summer visitors. Then we'll look at some campaigns that are already somewhat underway, either through video, branding, or general reach campaigns. We'll see what others are doing right and what we can learn from them. Only from there can we build some strategic foundations or the demographic, psychographic, and geographic factors that will play a part in summer travel. We'll wrap up with some tools and tactics that you can use midstream as your campaign takes off. In my experience, there's never been a great set it and forget it tourism campaign. You need to know how well, where, and why your effort is performing. And this section will give you some extra tips beyond what you may already be using. Now, we'll start with some great news. Daily new COVID cases are plummeting. Nationwide, the number of new cases per week have dropped to about a quarter of what they were in early January. The CDC also predicts that this trend will continue, and the number we have now will be reduced by half over the next month. And guys, this is in the middle of winter. As with any virus, flu, whatever, transmission rates are always higher in the cooler months. So to see this chart now in early March is wonderful news. And it's March already. You know, it feels weird that we're only like 2 weeks into 2021, but this time last year, it feels like a decade ago. It's so weird. Anyway, what does all this mean for confidence in travel? Precisely what you'd expect. According to destination analysts, last week provided some COVID era records. Optimism about the course of the pandemic is at a record high. Excitement about travel is rising. Over half of the survey respondents plan to take at least one leisure trip in the next 90 days. These are all great numbers. And with the record highs also comes some record lows. Perceptions about travel being unsafe is dropping. Avoidance of travel is lowering. Not much. That's good. We still need to be careful after all. But travel guilt is dropping. And overall, the openness to the concept of travel is moving back towards something that looks like normal. So we know that people are turning on to the idea of travel in the very near future, and not just a small percentage of people either, lots of people. Google recently reported that last month, travel related searches jumped over 60%. The time is coming, and as long as we're careful and responsible, I think it's going to be a wonderful travel season. But it will be different, of course. And here's how. First, the trips are going to be longer, and in many cases, more frequent. I think that's due to a number of factors. First, there's a lot of built-up cabin fever among many travelers. It'll probably take more than one trip to get them right. I heard a tri- I heard a term recently that really encapsulates this idea. It's called revenge travel. I love it, and I'm looking to do some revenge travel myself. Second, many people have made a perhaps permanent shift to working from home. That mobility will allow workers to work from their home or a hotel room and do more of it on their own schedule. So, this new freedom will seem to reflect the length of visits, and we should look into how to entertain guests over now in a more extended period of time. Next, which is kind of related, is they're going to spend more. That may go without saying since trips will be longer, but it is worth mentioning. Next, and probably the most significant, is where they choose to lay their heads. Interest in cabins and cottages is up since they appear to be safer and more distance than hotel rooms. And this isn't a 2021 phenomenon either. Interest in these secluded options increased last year, and they're only remaining popular options now. Next, we should look at how they're going to get to where they're going and what they plan to do when they get there. And the answer is road trips. I think we all know at this point that the motherload of guests will be traveling by car, and that creates a drastic shift in the plan in the trips that they plan and where they'll be going. 50% of recent survey respondents prefer a domestic or local destination versus 21 who would like to visit someplace international or farther away. 1 in 5 want their destination to be within driving distance of home, and travel by car is the only means of travel that draws majority interest, beating air travel by about 17 points. This mirrors the change that Airbnb has seen since 2019, back when trip distances over 3,000 miles were the most popular. And then in June 2020, trips between 50 and 500 miles were returning year over year growth. Before COVID, my idea of travel included grabbing your passport, finding somebody to drop me off at the airport, wearing shoes that came off easily in security. And now my concerns, as well as most travelers this year, clearly will be in what great places I can visit within a few hours drive. Once travelers get to their destination, what they're planning to do has shifted further towards outdoor and socially distant activities. This list of top destinations searched on TripAdvisor shows that people are looking for parks, beaches, hiking, camping, mountain biking. There are no museums, very few theme parks, just a ton of communing with nature. And this is just the top 5. The rest of the top 10 is no different. So, from all this, what destinations stand to gain the most? It's the destinations that I'd like to say have the small town advantage. They're the ones who've been promoting green space and less congestion for years now. So it's really old hat for them. It's now going to be harder, I think, for destinations that have conference centers and theme parks to fill than it will be for smaller cities and towns. A couple examples of places I think are going to do very well this year are like Winchester, Virginia, right? They're near 2 major interstates and close enough to DC and Northern Virginia to be a strong road trip consideration. There's also Sanford, Florida. They're also near 2 major interstates. They're right in the center of the state. They have a ton of waterfront activities, and they're close enough to Orlando proper to draw some of those day trippers. And Madison, Indiana. They're positioned between this massive Big Oaks National Wildlife Refuge and the Ohio River. They're also within driving distance of like Louisville, Lexington, Cincinnati, and they have an impressive amount of either socially distant or simply outdoor activities. So those attributes create a small town advantage, which are going to make smaller destinations more favorable this year. I'd like to talk about how destinations can play to their strengths while taking the needs and priorities of their guests into consideration. And in order to illustrate a couple of points, I'd like to show current campaigns of 2 destinations that, while very different, help me illustrate those points. First, we're going to start with a pretty major city, Charleston, South Carolina.
Here in Charleston, hospitality is a way of life. It's our culture, our heritage. It's who we are, as reliable as the rhythm of the changing tides. Like you, we've had to take a break from the world beyond our homes, waiting for brighter days to return, to once again leave our footprints in the sand. Well, we've missed y'all. We've taken the time to do some spring cleaning, gotten our hands dirty, whether it be in garden gloves or rubber gloves. Heck, We've even taken time to polish the silver for y'all. It's time to re-immerse yourself in history. Indulge in small curiosities. Breathe in that salt air. Watch the rising tide with a beverage by your side. Your friends are here to welcome you back to Charleston, and we can't wait to see you again.
Okay, that was a gorgeous video. Does it make me wish I was in Charleston right now? Yeah, kind of. But I already love that city, so I'm rather biased. They did a good job of addressing their attention to health and safety, maybe a bit too much, maybe at the expense of including some other things, but it's a beautiful ad. It looks nice, the footage is great, but I feel like maybe it falls short in the writing a bit. The narration is all about what Charleston is doing and what Charleston has done, and that's great, but you have to balance talking about your community with what the visitor wants, expects, and helping them envision themselves there. They only briefly allude to things you can do in Charleston. Now, I've been there, and it's one of those cities that you can't take in a day. It's a wonderful experience, and not enough of it is mentioned in the ad. Only brief metaphors about the beaches and whatnot. Overall, I think they do a good job at answering the number one question I think all ads need to deliver on. And that is, why us? Why would someone want to choose our destination over another? And for them, it's history and hospitality. Breweries and bars are everywhere. Beaches, they cover thousands of miles of coastline. Why would someone want to visit your destination specifically? Often, it's the history, the culture, those traits that you can't get anywhere else. This ad does a decent job of answering that. Perhaps more verbally, more visually than verbally, but it's there. Next, I'd like to cover a place that's a bit different, but one that I'm also pretty impressed with.
When this all started back in March, the community rallied and kept us busy.
The Oxford community has done an amazing job just encouraging one another to either buy gift cards, shop locally, and just be there for one another.
People care about their community, and they do want the businesses to continue on.
People are going to want a place to go when this is over.
We've taken a lot of precautions due to COVID.
We not only want to protect ourselves and our families, but we also want to protect all the locals here in the Oxford community.
I think there's so much value that can come out of being a small community during this time.
It takes all of us to go out and really look for that small mom and pop place, support those folks, because they're the ones who are going to really struggle during these times.
You're not just helping the business, but you're helping their employees, friends of yours, your next door neighbor.
When we go to some of the other restaurants, I know a lot of the people by name.
We're supporting our community, our town.
We can all come together and make it a good winter for all the businesses in Oxford.
We will get through this together.
All right. Clearly, Oxford, Ohio is very different from Charleston for a number of reasons. And this ad plays to their strengths. They answer that why right out of the gate by talking about community and putting that community first. They also do it through the words of their business owners. I feel like if I could go to Oxford, step into a restaurant, I'd be familiar with the staff more than I could in a larger city. And being able to establish that type of connection is powerful. If I had a critique, I'd say that some more outdoor activities incorporated would help because, as we've seen, that's going to be important. But it looks like this was filmed in the winter. So I'm sure that the cold and it getting dark earlier may have made things a little challenging in that regard. Now, I'm only doing reviews of single ads for this webinar because going in depth is something that I think only the destination that we're reviewing should see with us. So, a few things I've mentioned so far. Defining your why, finding your small town advantage, and focusing on drive traffic all kind of come together with a few concepts in this next section. We're going to cover a checklist of sorts to help you establish your key messaging points, campaign pillars, and the audiences that you'll lean on the most. We've covered these points so far. The why, being genuine at the expense of having a polished ad if necessary, and speaking to your guest priorities. Now, I'm going to provide you with a bit of a template to help you find your key messaging. Okay, I hope that gives you a foundation of what to say, how to organize and better understand your visitors, and spend less time where less time is needed. We're going to wrap up with some tools that you can use to keep current on how your campaigns are performing. And this will be especially important this year since a lot of us are expecting things to be different. We're just not sure by how much. The first tool is visual heat mapping on your website. Having Google Analytics or database tracking is good, but heat mapping takes it a step further. It's easier to analyze since it's so visual, and it gives you some data that those other tracking tools don't. We use a tool here called Crazy Egg, but there's Hotjar and a slew of other platforms with funny sounding names that you can choose from. In this example, I have two screen grabs. The one on the left shows two main things: a colored bar down the left and what looks like warm spots overlaid on the page. The colored bar shows you by warmth, brightness, and intensity of color how much attention visitors are giving to the content on that section of the page, that far down, basically. If the bar turns dark blue halfway down the page, then you know that not many people are scrolling very far, and you should reorganize your content or move calls to action farther up the page. The warm spots across the top here and in other parts of the screen grab show click activity. This is helpful, not just because you can tell right away what links are most popular, but if there's an area on your page that people think is a link and it isn't, this will tell you. In the screen grab on the right, you see little circles with plus signs in them. By clicking on these icons, you can get details about the visitors that are clicking each of your links. It's almost like Google Analytics for each link. This is particularly helpful if you're running things like paid ads or email campaigns. With this kind of tracking, you don't need to spend a lot of time to see how people are responding to your marketing, and then you can make adjustments to your website or your campaigns more quickly. Next is QR codes. If you were to ask me 18 months ago what my thoughts were about QR codes and marketing, my response would be very different from what it is today. These ugly little squares have made a comeback in a big way, and now's the time to take advantage of them. They're very helpful for brief surveys, which can give you qualitative feedback from your guests. I think there's no better feedback than the qualitative kind, and this is a way that people can quickly give it. Next is social listening. I talked about this in depth during our last webinar or the one before it, so I'll just give a quick overview. When using a social platform, in this case, we're using Awario, you can see in one place every mention about your destination on every major social channel. It's a little better than surveys, in my opinion, because it's totally uncensored and it's totally honest. Finally, this is one I've seen become incredibly powerful. Most cities, towns, and counties, they have a consortium of local business owners. And I won't try to minimize the value of having one of them. They are incredibly helpful. But I've seen some places take it a step further and build a local ambassador council. This group has bartenders, shop managers, and a lot of the frontline people that have conversations with their visitors every single day. They know about common bad experiences. They hear about lousy parking, and they're really the eyes and ears of your community. So formalizing a group of these workers can be very helpful in giving you a genuine view of the guest experience. So I guess that brings us to the end of our adventure today. With that, I will gladly take any questions that you have. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining me today. I hope this was helpful. Our contact information for Imagine is here on this slide. Feel free to send us an email about what you might want to see in a future webinar, questions that you had about this one. And you can also check out our podcast. It's the Imagine Nation podcast. And we just had a great episode launched today. It was a conversation with the tourism director for Orlando North, Seminole County, Florida. And it's hysterical. I love it. So check that out if you're into podcasts. So with that, I look forward to seeing you all next time, and I hope you all have a great week.